I'm Sarah Fenske, and this is the 314. Every episode, we sit down with St. Louisans who know what makes this place tick. Together, we explore why things are the way they are and how we can make them better. This episode of the 314 podcast is sponsored by Westport Plaza. As CEO of the firm New and Found, Steve Smith has made a major impact on St. Louis. His rehab of a 15-acre industrial site, City Foundry, has been a huge success in Midtown. And Steve is now speaking out about the project a different developer has proposed just next door in the historic Armory building and on an adjacent vacant lot. Steve is concerned that putting a massive data center on site could slow momentum in the neighborhood and miss out on an opportunity to make St. Louis a more vibrant place. We also talked about downtown St. Louis, where Steve's firm has been headquartered for years and where he's recently begun an ambitious redevelopment. Now, in just a moment, we'll talk to St. Louis Magazine staff writer Ryan Krull about what Missouri's Attorney General is up to. But first, let's hear from the CEO of New and Found. Steve Smith, welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. Good to be here.
So I was really glad you were able to join us because it feels to me like you're just on a roll. Like, you just announced these ambitious plans. You're going to redevelop the Mansion House apartments downtown.
Yeah.
You were part of this new music venue, the Sovereign, which just opened in Grand Center. And then City Foundry, which opened in 2021. It's just having this terrific year. On top of all this, you were just named the city's developer of the year. Do you feel like taking a victory lap today?
No, I get inspiration by feeling like we're making a difference for our community. I really do. At my age, I've had a good career, good family, and I want to be able to make an impact and give back. And seeing these things happen, which take an enormous number of people and great relationships and partners. So I get to be out front. So for the award, for instance, I'm out front, but there's a whole team behind me that makes this stuff happen.
So that doesn't go to your head?
Well, I hope not.
So let's talk a little bit about City Foundry, because I think there's so many things that come online in St. Louis. They're new and shiny. Everybody's excited about them. And then in a couple years, it just kind of fades out. Feels like the opposite has happened here. So foot traffic from January through August this year, it's up to 6.5% compared to the same period last year. And then the year-to-date sales are up 6.3% compared to 2024. What's driving that growth?
Well, I think there's a couple things. We continue to get a broader audience. So we have tour buses showing up at Foundry now.
These are the actual tourists from out of town.
Yeah, from out of town. Well, we have tour buses coming from high schools around the region. I'm there and a tour bus shows up. Oh, they're from MICDS or wherever. And then or someplace on the east side. And then we have tour buses coming. We've seen them from University of Kentucky or something. We had a tour bus coming from Minneapolis to New Orleans, stopping at City Foundry on the way. The point is, our tent is getting broader in terms of people who are wanting to come and see us. We have our core group, which are people that live generally in 3 to 5 miles, if you will. But when you look at where people are coming from, it's from the region and increasingly from around the country.
And so that wasn't initially the case? That's something that's happened in the last couple of years?
So everything that I and we have been trying to do is how do we change the St. Louis brand to a more positive national narrative? We have a great narrative around our sports, certainly our baseball team, but St. Louis as a region sometimes doesn't have the same kind of positive national stature as a place like Nashville or Austin or increasingly Columbus, Ohio, or places like that, where young people kind of naturally want to gravitate to. But when you look at the substance of what St. Louis has, the institutions, the attributes, the free amenities that we have for families, Nashville, Austin, and Columbus can't hold a candle to us.
Yeah.
So we suffer, I believe, by reputation and narrative as opposed to actual substance. Now, that being said, places like City Foundry are our attempt to create more things that are really attractive to young people and to community building. And those are the two things that I think we've been kind of successful at.
So when you guys first opened, I think what got everybody visiting was the food court. You had these amazing
Food hall.
diners. Food hall.
I have to give you that.
Yeah.
They are different.
You don't want to make it sound like a suburban shopping center.
That's correct.
Right? So you have this amazing food hall. These are restaurants from all over the world. You can get it all under one roof. But it seems like lately, part of the joy of going to City Foundry is far beyond just getting a meal. Was that intentional that you wanted to make this more of an experience, less of just a short visit?
Yeah. So two things. One is, it started with a food hall because we think about having a meal together is how you build relationships. You break bread together. So the food hall is the core of the foundry. And as you pointed out, it's a bunch of unique vendors, big tables. So you're likely to sit next to someone you don't know. But all of that is, I want to say it's the great gathering place of the St. Louis community. So increasingly, as we've continued to evolve, where we want to add additional programming, additional events. Actually, this past Wednesday, we had our live art market again. A couple weeks earlier, we had Maze Night Market. So we want to increasingly do programming that create destination and, again, draw a broad background of our community from a broader area. That's both good for business, but it's also good for our mission. And our mission really is to as I said earlier, kind of make St. Louis a more dynamic, fun city, especially for young people.
So I kind of stepped in it there when I referred to a food court versus a food hall. And this is a very different culinary experience. But there's a lot of things that I enjoy doing at City Foundry that I could also do at a suburban mall. And yet, this is a much different experience to go there. There's a reason the tour buses are coming to this. And it feels like a big part of that is the physical space, that you've taken this former manufacturing facility. Tell me how you first got this crazy idea that instead of just building something from scratch, which would have been so much easier, that you're like, I'm going to take this plant. This is what I'm going to turn into a food hall, turn into shops, turn into the other assets there.
So I would say that there's where I think design matters. As an architect, I have a bias towards that. A food court at the Galleria or West County Center doesn't look a whole lot different than a food court in Cincinnati or Denver or any place else USA. So there certainly was an intent, very conscious to how do we create a place that is really unique, really special, not like anything else you've ever seen. And the foundry development, the physical facility there is, I think that it's you go in there, people just there's nothing that they've ever seen like it. And that was by intention because that in this era of placemaking and being able to share unique experiences, we wanted to be able to provide that. So I think that's, that fundamentally is the difference. There was a plan prior to our involvement in City Foundry by several developers to tear it all down and build an inline big box strip center with a sea of surface parking. And, at the moment, hey, we'd get some development, we'd get some tax base, but that would not have done anything, in my opinion, to kind of differentiate St. Louis, to differentiate Midtown, compared to trying to do something unique. One other thing I would say, we are in the City Foundry sits in, I want to call it the center of our innovation community. Cortex is next door. We're not far from where T-Rex and Square is located. You have St. Louis University, Washington University. But those are institutions and businesses around innovation, great things happening. Early on, we thought, well, we want City Foundry to be the public face of innovation. So as we thought about the design, the curation of the tenants, the programming that we do on site, we want it to be innovative and have a kind of an innovative mindset as we create those things, as opposed to copying necessarily what happens in the county or other places.
You mentioned that other plan that someone had or several other people had to just do your standard big box stores there. Do you think sometimes St. Louis makes the mistake of saying, okay, we need something there. This is St. Louis. We can't count on getting something super cool. Let's just go what we can get, do what we can do, and that'll be good enough.
I think that is a force, not just in St. Louis and other places. I do think that we should give ourselves some credit because St. Louis has done some great, great things. And I think we are hard on ourselves. When you think about the amenities and the attributes we have, if you've been to the Symphony and the new, the Jack Taylor Music Center at the Symphony, it's world class.
It's amazing.
World class. Nashville, Austin, Columbus, they don't have anything like that. Obviously, the Arts Grounds, City Garden, the Gateway Mall. There's a lot of things that St. Louis has that did come from big thinking and big ideas led by individuals that really push this stuff forward. And then you do have forces that want to do the safe thing. But I do think that's in a lot of communities. We want to be part of that former. Let's take a chance. Let's take more risk. Let's try and make St. Louis's tradition of being an innovator and doing unique things. And let's continue that on. And that's what we've tried to do with everything related to City Foundry. And quite frankly, some of the other developments we've done, like the On-God Arts Hotel, as an example. So we want to do innovative things.
And you're doing them.
We hope so. So, the public seems to think that.
My guest today is Steve Smith. He's the CEO of New and Found, which has had a number of big successes and big projects in the last couple of years. We're going to go back to that conversation in just a moment. First, a word from our sponsor. Prost, St. Louis. Oktoberfest takes over Westport Plaza on October 17th and 18th. Enjoy live music all weekend from Russo and Company, Uber Cool, Die Spitzbaum, and the Wurst Bavarian Band. Cheer on traditional German dancers, test your grip in the Stein holding competition, and feast on authentic German eats and ice-cold brews. Bring your crew, raise a Stein, and make it a Westport weekend. See more at westportstl.com. And now back to our conversation with Steve Smith, the CEO of New and Found. So we're talking about not just settling for what we could do, going for what would be the best thing to do. I want to talk about another site that would be easy for people to write off. A lot of people are writing off, and it's right next door to City Foundry. This is the Armory and the adjacent vacant lot that's right there. Now, there's an arm of Green Street Development that is pitching this as a data center. Are you worried that if these two sites become data centers, that could slow down some of the momentum in Midtown that City Foundry has helped to generate?
Yeah, so it's a challenge. So we really believe that City Foundry and now Green Street actually bought into the same concept when they did the original concept for the Armory, and I think what they did was terrific. Obviously, there's been some challenges over there, but our aspiration is for not just the City Foundry itself, but the entire district there to be a hub, again, of innovation, of community building, unique places to congregate around food, entertainment, office, all the amenities that create a vibrant city. And that is a tremendous site on the interstate at Grand and next to City Foundry, next to Cortex, next to SLU, all the things there. Like what I mentioned earlier, which is we could have had an inline strip center at, where City Foundry is. Do we take what is quick and convenient, or do we really hold off on doing a bigger and better thing? So we would love, what we would love to see that site is to be an extension of what City Foundry is already have happening. And that would be our aspiration.
And that extension of what you're doing, would that be more restaurants? Would that be more office space? What could that be?
Yes and yes. And I would add the brick line is going to go right through the middle of that site, and it will connect Armory and Foundry. And that's funded and in design, and we've been in design meetings for that. And if you look at other cities like Atlanta with the Beltline, I was just in Indianapolis earlier this week. They have the Culture Trail. It is amazing the development that happened around these trails. And we're going to have, in my opinion, the coolest part of the brick line is going to be around Armory Foundry. And then we're going to put something that doesn't really add to that. That doesn't, our goal to change the narrative about St. Louis as a dynamic, vibrant city in the mind of I keep gravitating around young people, isn't enhanced unless we do the sort of things that are already happening at Foundry, which is, like you say, it's more entertainment, it's more food, it's more beverage, it's more entertainment. And quite frankly, with that will come office. We've had great success at City Foundry with office because of the amenities we have. And we do think there's going to be increasing demand over time for creative Class A office space.
So you guys do have that office space there.
100,000 square feet, full.
It's full.
Full.
Okay. So at this point, you're having to turn people away if they wanted to go lease office space.
We have inquiries. We have a phase 3 office building, which we hope to be able to move forward here in the not too distant future, because the demand has been there. And what we're seeing, and I'm a business owner, we, like all business owners, how do we get our employees back? How do we get them engaged? How do we get them to where they want to be back? And, one thing we're seeing is a flight to quality in office space, but also a flight to where there is amenities, especially like at City Foundry, amenities that you, quite frankly, don't pay for. It's there.
Yeah.
If you're an office tenant. And we do think there's an opportunity in the greater district. You're also a block from St. Louis University and Cortex. So you're around where there's smart young people. So I think there's, over the long haul, our view is 10 to 20 years from now, not 2 to 3 years from now. We're really building for the long haul.
So I hear a lot of people say, okay, we've got all this empty office space downtown. The last thing St. Louis needs is more office space. It sounds like you're saying, well, we don't necessarily need more of the kind of office space we have. We need that Class A office space.
Yeah, so I've been downtown for over 30 years, and I own an office building downtown, and we're in a niche building. We're in a historic building, but there's just like a lot of, you know, how housing's changed over time, hotel, hospitality, healthcare, all those facilities change over time. And I think office of the future is going to be different than office of the past. And that's what I think the opportunity is, certainly in Midtown and other places.
In the office of the future, they might want to be in a building like the Armory, be right next door to City Foundry, build off that kind of buzz.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what we're seeing. I mean, that's what has been proven out.
And yet, again, you hear people say, well, they tried that. They had the Armory there. They were redeveloping it for office space. I guess the tenant fell through. They developed it as a giant bar. That didn't work. What makes you say, let's give this another bite of that apple?
Well, so sometimes I mentioned earlier, there was a plan for Foundry to be an inline strip center, and I'll credit Joe Rohde, who was the alderman at the time, who would not support that. And had he supported that, City Foundry would not have happened. And Midtown would be a completely different, and it was years later that we came along. So, I do think it begs a broader question about, do we take a decision, I'll call it somewhat in haste, around key properties. You can't do this everywhere, but to me, this is a very, very key parcel because of its location on the interstate, on the brick line, next to the universities and institutions. What is the right use for that? Now, I do wonder, I'll throw this out there as an architect. I always feel like, well, there's a solution for everything. I say I live not in black and white, I live in 50 shades of gray. So, there's always a solution. We just got to figure it out. And, maybe there's a development that includes a data center in a more dense, mixed use type development. I wouldn't put that out of, as not a possibility. I mean, it's a big site.
You just don't want two big buildings full of data centers. It could be maybe part of something that had a lot of other things going on.
I guess I would be what I'm for. I'm for creating something that makes St. Louis a more dynamic, vibrant city.
Yeah.
That's what I'm for. And so I'm always going to make the case for, are the moves we're making on critical sites and critical locations adding to St. Louis's brand narrative in a competitive national market for talent, to be able to for our children and our grandchildren to be able to grow and prosper in this region. That's what I think we need to be thinking about.
So I got to ask one more question about this site, because this is a rare chance for me to sort of pick the brain of an architect.
Yeah.
It is kind of, on one hand, it has all these assets that you mentioned. On the other hand, it's kind of this strange place where highways are sort of cutting through it. And, there's kind of this almost ravine where Grand is like a bridge. Have you seen other cities be able to use a site that has those kind of challenges, do something creative where it actually increases foot traffic, sort of unifies these various parts of town?
Yeah, so it's interesting. This site is kind of interesting because it really has almost every access of transportation type. So obviously the interstate's there right now. It's kind of cumbersome to get to. Grand is heavily traveled. You've got the brick line coming in. You got Metrolink stops there. You're going to have a pedestrian bridge between Armory and Foundry. There are places in multiple cities where you build up against like Grand Avenue Bridge. I mean, it's not actually, I think the early Green Street plans had shown it that way, to where the buildings were basically built as if Grand Avenue was the front door.
Yeah.
That absolutely is done in other places. Yeah, it's a great site that we should think big and long term for. And I will say, I do want to be on the record to say I support data centers. That's the future. I think we want to be thoughtful about where they go and then how they're incorporated in a broader development area. And I think that's what my opinion is relative to the Armory site.
So I pushed you to talk about a lot about a site you don't control. I do want to just save a little time here to talk about one that you do, and that's Mansion House.
Yeah.
That construction begins this month. There are, again, some of these naysayers saying, oh my goodness, they're going to add more residences downtown. We already have all these residences downtown. Do people want to be downtown? You've been in downtown for a long time. What makes you want to dive in on this project to add some relatively affordable housing units in downtown St. Louis?
Well, first of all, there is a lot happening downtown. And we live in an era where there's just a lot of voices that go out there. And so, again, I think downtown has a lot more positive happening than a lot of people realize because of the soundbite era that we're in right now. And so, the Millennium site, we consider as our kind of neighbor. That's going to be happening as a very ambitious, very exciting development by a very capable group, Cordish, doing that site. We're right up the street from that with Mansion House. Both of those front on the Arch grounds where we spent $350 million a couple years ago. We think of Mansion House being a 29-story building with a 91-acre yard that someone else takes care of, which is the aircraft.
Best of both worlds.
Exactly. Then when you start heading to the west, there's an enormous amount happening with Alex Oliver along Washington Avenue, with the O'Laughlins around City Foundry, with the Taylors around Carolyn Kindle around the St. Louis SC. Got the Brick Line coming into downtown. So there's a lot of energy happening, arguably well over $1 billion of plans in the core of downtown St. Louis. We have a couple of high-profile negative buildings like Railway Exchange. That will get solved.
Yeah, they're dealing with that.
They're dealing with that. It will get solved. So I think I'm very bullish on downtown, and I love the Mansion House because you can have a high-rise lifestyle. I live in a high-rise building, by the way. You can have a high-rise lifestyle at a relatively affordable price with a park, the Gateway Arts grounds, literally as your front yard, and all the amenities that happen, in that part of downtown. So we're very excited about it.
So you're always sort of playing the long game here. You're thinking ahead. And I think this other project that you just finished, the Sovereign, this is a really good example of this. Tell us the story of how you first got interested in doing a music venue.
Now,
That hasn't been your background.
So sometimes I'll acquire key buildings. And so this was a building on Washington Avenue at Leonard Street, which is in Grand Center, close to my Moto Museum and Moto Complex. And it became available. And so I just bought the building because I wanted to make sure that the right development happened in the long run. And I liked the building.
And this is what year?
This is 2014, 11 years ago.
A long time ago.
And we explored some different design concepts for it. And then Chris Hansen of the Kranzberg Arts Foundation and Ken and Nancy Kranzberg are synonymous with Grand Center and do so many wonderful things. And Chris runs the Kranzberg Arts Foundation. And he approached me and said, Steve, what do you think about making this a concert venue? I like that idea. I grew up when Mississippi Nights was a place where my generation went to, and it's part of our, growing up memory. And yet we don't really have that now.
Yeah.
At that size. It's a flat floor, 1,200 capacity. There's just...
It feels intimate, but you can still get a lot of people in there.
Exactly.
It's
and then in a historic building, it's kind of
Yeah.
gritty and grimy a little bit, which is intentional. And so anyway, that was a number of years ago. And anyway, I love the idea. And Tim Weber of Old Rock House is our promoter who promotes it. So we have a great team, the Kranzbergs, Chris Hansen. Our organization designed it, built it, and developed it. And anyway, I think it adds another quality to the Grand Center District. Interestingly, we opened a week before the Symphony, the St. Louis Symphony. Powell Hall did their edition. So we've got classical music and everything happening at Powell. And then we have basically up-and-coming bands as well as maybe retro bands coming to the Sovereign in Grand Center.
Have you gotten a chance to go to a show?
I have. I went there opening night. So the Music at the Intersection Festival.
I was there too. It's funny we didn't run into each other, but I feel like that band was so good,
Oh, it was
so
awesome.
loud. It was
Awesome.
just, it felt like we were in the middle of the coolest city in the world.
People sometimes come to Foundry and other things we've done, like the Sovereign. They say, this doesn't feel like St. Louis, which both a compliment and a little bit of a question. What do you mean? St. Louis is something really cool. And sometimes we just need to change the narrative. Every person speaking needs to talk about what is right, all the good things we have, because we have so much.
So I started this conversation asking if you felt like taking a victory lap, and I know you didn't really take me up on that, but I'm wondering that night at the Sovereign, as you're there listening to that band, and they're kind of blowing the sound system out, it sounded so amazing. Did you find yourself thinking yes, I have done something good. This is a feather in my cap here.
Yeah, I probably don't necessarily think of it quite that way. What I do, I get enjoyment seeing all the, I wish I would have run into you. Anyway, seeing all these people having a good time. And I played a role, and I mentioned the other parties that were part of this, in making it happen. There's a purpose in my life. I've been blessed, and I can help other good things happen for other people. And that's where I get fulfillment and satisfaction. And being there.
You felt that night.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Steve Smith, CEO of New and Found, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate it.
And now for the closer. Catherine Hanaway took over as Missouri Attorney General last month, and a case she inherited from her predecessor offers a good example of what she intends to prioritize. Her office's detective work has also revealed the dirty secret of one of the area's biggest retailers. And joining us now with the story is St. Louis Magazine staff writer Ryan Krull. Ryan, welcome.
Hey, great to be on the Dollar General beat.
Yes, so we're talking here about this national retailer, Dollar General. How did they get into the Missouri Attorney General's crosshairs?
Sure. So basically, the allegation against them was that the price on the aisle, on the sticker price, was not what people were actually paying at the register. In many cases, customers, thought they were buying a product that was significantly lower cost than what they were actually paying whenever they checked out.
So that seems like a pretty incendiary allegation.
Yeah.
What kind of proof is there in this lawsuit?
Yeah, so quite a bit, actually. This was a case where the Attorney General's office, along with a few other state agencies, really did their homework. They investigated about 150 Dollar Generals throughout Missouri.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't even know we had that many.
I think there's a little over 600 in total. It's one of the most prominent sort of retailers in the country, and Missouri is no exception. But anyway, they basically shopped about 5,000 items across the country, or at least they checked the price on about 5,000 items. And they found in many, many cases, there was this price discrepancy. And they kind of created a scoring system where if any one store had 3 items or more that were priced incorrectly, it was given like a failing grade by the investigators. And I think it was something like 92, 93 stores failed this test that the AG's office put it through.
92 out of the 140.
7, yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's a pretty good chunk. What could possibly be the explanation, or I guess the excuse, of how they end up with so many discrepancies?
Sure. So the AG's office is alleging something akin to like price gouging, that this was a scheme they had to get more money. Dollar General, none of their attorneys would talk to me. They're from a firm that I think just doesn't really deal with the media kind of as a rule. Nothing necessarily specific about this case. However, there is a deposition in which someone from Dollar General says, well, all of our prices are set in Nashville, which is where Dollar General Corporation is headquartered, and they get sent out electronically to all the 20,000 stores throughout the country. So basically, you could imagine a scenario where if the staff weren't super diligent about updating the physical price tags, that they could have been changed in the computer from Nashville, but not on the store shelves in the Patch neighborhood or in Kansas City or wherever. And that is a relatively innocent explanation of how this could have come about. I'm not saying that was the case. That's the best I can come up with in Dollar General's defense.
Makes me wonder if the discrepancy was always, though, in favor of the retailer. Then you have to kind of question, like, okay, yet, people are always being quoted a lower price than they're paying. That wouldn't hold water.
I should say that the lawsuit against them does occasionally list a discrepancy that's in the customer's favor.
Interesting.
But that is like the distinct minority. Yeah.
So this lawsuit, this was filed by Catherine Hanaway's predecessor. This was then Attorney General Andrew Bailey, who's since gone off to this job at the FBI. He was known for like this politically focused litigation.
Yeah.
It certainly put him on Trump's radar. You argue that this lawsuit instead tells us something about Catherine Hanaway, who inherited it. How so?
Sure. So whenever she took over the office, she said that she was going to kind of get back to the basics of prosecuting, fraud. She's going to look out for consumer protection lawsuits, which this definitely sort of is under that umbrella. And Bailey, in his term, he sued, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. He sued, I think my favorite lawsuit of his was he sued the mayor, or he threatened to investigate the mayor of Kansas City over a tweet that was put out by the Kansas City Chiefs kicker. How's that for a sentence?
Huh.
Yeah. So I think she basically is trying to kind of get back to what historically has been the mandate of the AG's office, which is, looking out for Missourians, kind of acting as the state's law firm and advocating on their behalf. So, I think this lawsuit is very much in kind of keeping with what Attorney General Hanaway has said will be the focus of her office.
So she has a political background. Like, she was Speaker of the Missouri House, first woman to do that, just like the first woman to be the Attorney General. Do we have any sense at this point of whether she, is sort of being this neutral consumer watchdog, or if there's also this political, Republican sort of focus?
Sure. Well, I mean, I get, politics is never going to be entirely divorced from the job. And I would say cautiously, it does seem like, she is kind of taking this back to the basics and nuts and bolts of the job mentality. However, I think a big word of caution is maybe needed, because if you recall, whenever Andrew Bailey was initially appointed to the job, he kind of came in as the guy who was going to not hold the job to seek higher office, because it was
like Eric
Schmidt, Josh Hawley. Yeah, exactly. So she wouldn't be the first to kind of do a 180 in that regard, but there's really no reason to think that's the case as of right now.
Yeah, I gotta say, I know Catherine a bit. She had been a guest on the Legal Roundtable. I host on public radio, and she's a very smart person. I have high hopes just because she seems like so clear-eyed, common sense, intelligent. I think that one of the things that makes me most hopeful about her is I think she's really happy in Missouri. She's had this long career here in politics and in law. She was the chair of the firm Hush Blackwell. I don't think she's trying to catch President Trump's eye and like take some job in D.C. I think she's probably happy to be the Attorney General, which we haven't had in a while.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
So Dollar General, this litigation has been going on now for a couple years. Where does this stand now?
Sure. So it was supposed to go to trial in St. Louis City on the 1st of October, but essentially the sides had a disagreement where the AG's office wanted this thing tried before a jury. Dollar General wanted what was called a bench trial, where just the judge would decide the verdict. And that makes sense because generally speaking, you want that jury trial if you think some aspect of your case is going to kind of appeal to the masses or the passions of the populace, that sort of
People
thing.
will be so mad. How dare Dollar General overcharge me?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how many people have warm feelings towards, Dollar General and just retailers pulling one over on people in general is a pretty persuasive case to 12 random people. But there was some disagreement about that. The Judge Michael Nobles in St. Louis City said, no, because of the way this lawsuit was brought, it has to be a bench trial. So he denied the state's request for a jury trial. The state appealed that. That appeal was denied, but they could still appeal to the Supreme Court. Anyway, long story short, it's probably going to be about a year, maybe a little bit less, until this thing actually goes either before a jury or before a judge.
Or, they may settle it.
They may settle, yeah.
St. Louis Magazine staff writer Ryan Krull, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you.
I'm Sarah Fenske, and that's the 314 for today. You can find out more in our podcast show notes and at stlmag.com. You can also find me and Ryan every day in your inbox. That's thanks to St. Louis Magazine's fantastic free newsletter, St. Louis Daily. It's a fresh take on St. Louis with insight and original reporting. Sign up at stlmag.com/newsletters. The 314 is a production of St. Louis Magazine with audio editing by Brendan Shanahan. I'm Sarah Fenske, and this is the 314. See you next time.